Nisargadatta was somebody that I discovered probably in my early 20s. I came across the book I Am That. I flipped through it at the bookstore. I bought it, brought it home, put it on my shelf, and then read through it a little bit, but I really didn't understand it much at all. It didn't really mean a whole lot for me, so I put it on the bookshelf, and it probably remained there for the better part of the next 10 years or so. And I didn't sort of really rediscover it until just about the time that I started to teach, when my teacher asked me to start to share the Dharma. And when I started to teach, I kind of picked up the book again, and I saw it in the bookshelf, and I started reading through it. And the thing that struck me the most was that I remember reading this sort of description of realization, his own realization, and it's become a very, very, very famous description. And what it says is, when I look within and see that I'm nothing, that is wisdom. And when I look without and see that I'm everything, that's love. And between those two, my life turns. And I remember reading that, and I was really stunned. It was almost as if someone had put what I had experienced, what I had realized, into perfect words, into the most simple, elegant description possible. And of course, he just came up with that description off the cuff when he was sort of talking to somebody. And this sort of began my getting reacquainted with this amazing Indian sage. So those of you who don't know much about Nisargadatta Maharaj, he was probably one of the great exponents of modern non-duality, probably along with Ramana Maharshi. Nisargadatta, between the two of them, were the greatest exponents of non-duality in the last 100 years, probably. And he didn't meet his own guru until he was in his early 30s, 34 years old. Before that, he really didn't display a whole lot of interest in spirituality, but a friend ended up convinced him to go to this town and see this sage. And when he met the sage, when he met the person that was to become his teacher, his guru, he was immediately struck by him. And it awoken something very, very deep and very, very powerful within Nisargadatta. He took initiation from this guru, and his quest began in earnest. As he said, so he was 34 years old. And as he himself says, by the time he was 37, in the span of 3 short years, he was a fully realized being. And he went on to teach for many, many decades until he died. Every day in his apartment in Bombay. He attracted seekers from all over the world, and they would come to see him in this little room above his apartment in Bombay. And if you've ever seen videos of this, it's quite remarkable, because it's quite different from our Western idea of what spirituality is all about, where it's very hushed and quiet, and everything is just so. And here he is in the middle of Bombay, and the traffic's blaring out the door and outside, and the fans inside are sort of rattling away, and it's very noisy, and it's almost chaotic. And there he is sitting in this room, and he was quite an energetic, man. He could be quite expressive, and it seems like sort of the emotion of the moment just sort of flowed through him. He could be extremely loving, extremely kind. He could be fierce. He could be confrontive even. He could be, and he was, whatever was necessary for the person that was speaking to him. And quite a few books were compiled, none of which he himself compiled, but other people compiled of his teachings. Probably the most famous one is I Am That. It's become an absolute sort of spiritual classics, one of the real classics of probably the last 50 or 100 years. And a lot of people actually that I've talked to have had a very similar experience that I do when they first discover his teachings, when they first read or read one of his books of his compiled dialogues with people. They often people have said, they really didn't understand it much at first, and then they put it away, and some years later they rediscovered, and strangely enough, when they picked it up for the second time, they had a much, much deeper understanding and a much, much deeper appreciation for what he was talking about. He had an amazing appeal to the Western mind. He had a way of something about the way that he languaged his realization and his teaching made him very appealing to many, many Western seekers. So people came from all over the world to seek this humble man out in his sort of humble abode. He never had an ashram. He never built, any big institution or organization. He just taught in his own dynamic, fierce, loving, and humble way, in his simple way. As he himself said, he always claimed not to be very educated, and yet he had a clarity that was amazing. And so when I rediscovered him, I was quite amazed by this expression of his own awakening, looking inside, seeing that he's nothing, looking out and seeing that he's everything. And as he said, between those two, my life turns. And this is really a universal spiritual experience. I've seen literally hundreds of people look inside deeply and see that they are nothing, and then look out and see that they're everything. That's the beauty of this teaching, is that it's so universal. It's not packaged with a lot of ideology. There's not a story to believe. There's not a founding story. It's just very simple, straightforward, direct teaching. And because I really, really love and respect his teaching, I wanted to bring this forth. And because I know so many people really love and deeply respect his teaching. And so, of course, I'm going to, try to be as true as I can to his teaching, but of course it'll be filtered through my own experience, my own point of view. But for anybody who really wants, his teachings, there's many collections of his teachings, and in many ways they speak for themselves. And so this is why I really wanted to bring this teaching forth. And I think also a part of Nisargadatta's teaching, you can find the essence of it in so many teachings, so many other teachings of the world, teachings and traditions that have been around hundreds, if not thousands of years, that the sort of deep esoteric underlying structure of a lot of these the most pointed parts of these esoteric traditions have a similarity, have a kinship with what Nisargadatta was bringing forward. It's as if Nisargadatta reached into this long ancient tradition and pulled out the gems, pulled out the diamonds of the teaching, and held them up for everyone to see. But of course, as he himself said, he did not teach by quoting scripture or referencing anything else other than his own experience, which gives his teaching such a dynamic, immediate, and authentic quality, is that although there was a tradition, there was also a teaching lineage that came from his own guru, that he very much came from his own experience. And I think that is what gives his teaching such power, such power. One of the hallmarks of Nisargadatta's teachings is its directness, its single-mindedness, in a sense. His whole teaching revolves around awakening to your true nature, awakening to what you really are. His whole teaching is about that. Realizing your own nothingness, realizing your own everythingness. Everything else to him was periphery. And in today's world, where we often look to spirituality to serve a huge number of needs, whether it's a huge number of personal needs or a huge number of needs in the world, Nisargadatta and his teachings were very clear on, in other words, he knew what his teaching was oriented towards, and he really didn't deviate from the fact that his teachings were oriented towards the total realization of the absolute nature of reality. He talked about that in a dizzying number of ways, but all the different ways and all the different ways that he languaged how he talked about it always came from his own experience. And so, as I said, that's what gave them their dynamic power and their dynamic quality. And so, one of the hopes I have for this course, being here with you, is I want to bring forward some of the real main themes of the teaching, because the teaching is, when you get right down to it, it has a beautiful and precise simplicity to it. And yet this is the power of the teaching, is its simplicity, its straightforwardness. It's a narrow, direct focus. That's the beauty of it. That's also the challenge of it, is to stay focused, keep with that sort of narrow road. I want to read a quote from Nisargadatta here for you. And he's talking about meeting his guru and how he related to his guru. And he said, "My guru ordered me to attend to the I am and give full attention to nothing else. I just obeyed. Whatever happened, I would turn away my attention from it and remain with the sense I am. It may look too simple, even crude. My only reason for doing it was that my guru told me so, yet it worked." And there's two things that I think were pivotal for him, and I think they're also their own kind of teaching, is, when he recognized the profundity and the truth of what his guru was telling him. His guru said, you are the fundamental reality. You are the absolute. And here is the way to the realization. Dwell in the sense of I am. The sense of I am. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And Nisargadatta had said that from the moment his teacher told him that, he spent all of his spare time meditating and dwelling on the sense of I amness. He did what was suggested to him. He did what his guru told him. And this is really unusual, actually, to be that single-minded, that one-pointed in his purpose and his pursuit, that he really zeroed in on this one goal the goal of realization, and he oriented his search around what his guru had told him. You are the ultimate reality. Now go out and realize it. And the best way to go do that is to dwell in the sense of I am. And so Nisargadatta did that. One of the things I've appreciated about Nisargadatta is, if you read through a lot of his teachings, he has no problem sounding at times paradoxical and even totally contradictory. To one questioner, one seeker, he may tell them to do meditation. He may tell them to spend lots of time in silence. To somebody else, he may say, oh, forget meditation. You just listen to what I say and take it fully into yourself, and you can achieve full realization on the spot. He didn't hold himself to a rigid set of ideas. He saw each person as they came to him, and he gave them the medicine that he thought they needed. And so, in these kind of radical teachings of non-duality that Nisargadatta brought forward, in the absolute nature of things, of course, we don't need to do anything to come to awakening, to come to realization. The reason for that is because what we're seeking, we already are. That's the fundamental realization, actually, is that you are what you seek. Whether you seek God or the ultimate reality or however you describe the ultimate, that in truth you are the ultimate. And so we don't find the ultimate by going looking for it. If anything, we just remove our ideas, our false notions of who we are and what we are. And when we've removed all the false notions, all the false belief patterns, what will be left is our true nature. And so even though that's part of the realization of the absolute, and it's part of the, I guess you could say, the philosophical underpinnings of the whole teaching, Nisargadatta also was a very practical man. And he realized you can't just tell everybody that and expect them to wake up to the reality of it just like that. In fact, the overwhelming majority of people will need to do exactly what he did, which was commit themselves very one-pointedly. And as he used to constantly say, he used the word earnestness. He would say, you have to be earnest. You have to be one-pointed. You have to be committed. You really need to want to realize the truth of your being. It has to be the top of your priority. And so he would often use this term earnestness. And he himself was an example. His seeking of self-realization was a fantastic example of what earnestness was. He was, his guru told him what to do, how to go about realizing this, and he did it with great dedication, with great commitment. And so all of these things, dedication, commitment, go into describing really what earnestness is. And earnestness is also sort of an attitude of really, really wanting to know the truth of our being, the truth of God. And so when you read through Nisargadatta's teachings, as I said, sometimes he can talk about practice a lot. Sometimes he's trying to basically demolish someone's idea of practice if they are attached to it. But over and over and over and over again, the most common part of his teaching was telling people to dwell in the sense of I amness. I wrote down this wonderful quote that came from Nisargadatta when talking about sadhana, which is spiritual practice. Sadhana is a search for what to give up. Empty yourself completely. Sadhana is a search for what to give up. It's very contrary, isn't it, to the way that most of us go about our seeking. In some way, we're looking to be fulfilled by it, filled up, whether we're looking for a piece of knowledge or an experience that we want to have, or something that we want to possess. And Nisargadatta is saying what spiritual practice really is a search for what to give up. That turns the normal orientation of spiritual seeking on its head. When you really understand this is all about what can I give up? How much can I let go of? My beliefs, my opinions, my definitions of myself, definitions of others, judgments, my identity, the identity of how I see myself, how I feel about myself. And Nisargadatta is defining that spiritual practice itself is a way of giving all of that up, right? And sometimes he would advocate questioning your belief, questioning your opinion, questioning everything. But his most direct methodology was dwelling in the sense of I am. Now, here's a quote of his which is a key to exactly what the sense of I am is pointing to. He says, the I am is the awareness before thoughts. The I am is the awareness before thoughts. Now, when he's saying to dwell in the sense of I am, he's therefore saying to dwell in the sense of awareness before thoughts, not the idea of awareness. He's not saying dwell in your idea of awareness, dwell in your image of awareness, dwell in your understanding of awareness. He's saying dwell in your sense of awareness, dwell in your sense of I amness. He goes on further, learn to distinguish the immovable in the movable, the up-changing in the changing, the not changing in the changing, till you realize that all differences are in appearance only and oneness is a fact. Once you can say with confidence, born from direct experience, I am the world is myself. You are free from desire and fear on one hand, and become totally responsible for the world on the other. The senseless sorrow of mankind becomes your sole concern. And I think this points to a quality of love that Nisargadatta often spoke about also, that flows out of deep self-realization. That from the deepest core of our being, it may be empty, it may be formless, we may experience our nothingness, our no-thingness, but it's also what flows out of it is a great love and a great compassion. And this also is one of those paradoxes within Nisargadatta's teachings. Because admittedly, often Nisargadatta counseled people, basically, don't worry about the world, leave the world to itself. He even often didn't talk for long periods of time people about their personal problems, their relationships, their work, their things like that. He had this very, as I said, he had this very intense and fierce one-pointedness on self-realization. And yet it would be really a misunderstanding of him and his teaching to think that he had no care. He didn't care for the individual. He didn't care for the world. That he actually speaks quite eloquently about how, of course, when you see that you're everything, as he said, that's love. That's love. And as he said, the senseless sorrow of mankind becomes your sole concern. That is the fruit, the fruition of deep and abiding awakening, of self-realization. That the sorrow of mankind becomes your sole concern. And so that speaks to a deep, abiding unity and also a deep, abiding love. And on Nisargadatta, he also talked about this practice of dwelling in the sense of I amness, abiding in the sense of I amness, as a stepping stone. He would say it's not the goal. It's a means to a deeper realization, the realization of the absolute, which I'll get to, or we'll get to later in this course. But he would say over and over and over and over and over that the I am, the fact that you exist, is the one thing that you have in this life. The one thing you can know for certain is that I am, I exist. Even if you deny your existence, you have to exist in order to deny it. So the fact that you exist, that any of us exist, that any of us can say, I am, this is the currency that we all have in this life, that we're born with, our own existence. Whether we like it or not, how we judge it or not, none of that is as primary as I am. I exist. The beauty of Nisargadatta's teaching is he strips away all that's periphery to the I am. He's getting past all the self-definitions. As he said, dwell in the sense of I am. Not in the sense of I am this or I am that, I am good, I am bad, I am worthy, I am unworthy. All the ways that the mind defines itself are illusions. So when we are chasing around all the ways that our mind defines ourselves and others and the world, we are literally lost within a dream state. We're lost within illusion. We are lost within a dream without even knowing we're lost in a dream. We are taking a bunch of words and ideas that are fully and absolutely conditional, and we are ascribing reality to them. And the beauty and the directness of this practice that he had, to dwell in the sense of I am, is that you immediately, right from the beginning, rivet your attention inwardly to a place inside that's prior to all the descriptions, all the judgments, all the opinions. And so his teaching is very, very immediate. It doesn't waste time with lots of fancy explanations about anything, but it gets right down to what's really, truly important in spiritual life. If we want to awaken, we have to get down to the actual business of discovering who we are, what we are. And we do that by returning to our own experience, which is the key. To return to your own experience of your own sense of I am. And so if you do that, even as we are here together, even as I'm talking, to get to your own sense of I am, or sometimes for different people to word it a little bit differently works also, because as Nisargadatta said himself, that the I am is the awareness before thoughts. so you can just get this sense of awareness before thoughts. The sense of it, the feel of it. And the beauty of this is that you're not trying to define what's before thought or define awareness before thought. You're not looking for a better definition of yourself. You're looking for a deeper, more profound, more true experience of your true nature. To perceive, to realize a completely deeper sense of your own being. And so, again, you're not looking to define yourself in any particular way. You're looking to go into the experience that exists before all thoughts, all judgments, all opinions, even all experiences. Just to the I am. Sometimes often when I teach, I will bring it right down to the I sense. And dwell in the sense of I. And you can do that just by saying the words in your own mind, I or I am. And they orient you intuitively towards a deep kind of silence and stillness. And that stillness and that silence is itself conscious. Nisargadatta also defined the I am as consciousness itself. But the I am is consciousness. And being consciousness, it is completely without form. I mean, what's the form of consciousness, right? And so the power of this teaching is that it brings you very, very directly into a place that many people avoid their whole life, but it takes you there immediately, which is your own formless nature, which can feel initially like a real emptiness. A silence and a stillness where there's nothing and nobody there, that behind all these ideas of ourselves and experiences and memories, all these experiences happen against a backdrop of consciousness. So even as we are here together right now, this whole moment happens against the backdrop of consciousness. My voice, your hearing of the voice, my image on your computer, all of this is made possible because of consciousness. The content of consciousness is ever changing, constantly changing. Whether the content is what we see, hear, taste, touch, feel, think, the content is ever changing. The content is just sort of the bubbling up of almost an infinite variety of conditioned elements interacting together. But the consciousness upon which all this happens, and the consciousness within which this moment occurs, is what Nisargadatta is pointing at when he talks about I am. And you can actually begin to get a sense of that, your own sense of that, in literally an instant, in a moment. The challenge of such a direct teaching is that it doesn't give your mind anything else to play with. Now, of course, if you read through the dialogues and the books of his teaching, you'll find him time and time and time and time again giving this teaching over and over and over and over and over. And as soon he'll give the teaching and someone will listen to it, and the next thing out of their mouth will be, well, basically some other question that really has nothing to do with the teaching. It has really nothing to do with what he said. I think this is why he returned over and over and over to the importance of earnestness, a kind of seriousness, keeping your eye on the ball so that your mind just doesn't wander off to oh, here I have the next question, I have the next question, and how can this help me with this problem, and how can this help me with that problem? And you saw this over and over again in his dialogues, and this happens with any spiritual teacher, of course, because, we all do have our challenges in life. The things we're interested aren't just usually one thing. But in terms of this particular type of spiritual approach, when we're looking into the teaching of Nisargadatta Maharaj, you have to remember that it is almost exclusively oriented towards self-realization, towards awakening to the absolute nature of reality. That's its focus. That's really, in a certain sense, that's all it's concerned about. And some people, can say and have said that it's a very narrow focus, or it's overly narrow focused, or, it doesn't address sort of the totality of human experience or the totality of the world. And of course, it doesn't. No teaching does. No teaching addresses everything. In fact, if you try to have a teaching address everything, then it doesn't address anything particularly well. In other words, it gets watered down, It's just like you wouldn't go to your math teacher and at college, you wouldn't go to a math teacher and say, okay, teach me everything there is to know about literature. You go to an English teacher to teach you that. You wouldn't go to a computer specialist to teach you how to drive a car. You go to someone who's an expert in that. And yet sometimes in spirituality we think that the spiritual teaching should be the answer to absolutely every single one of our challenges in life. And that's understandable, because the human being in one sense is absolutely simple, but from another perspective is a tremendously complex thing and lives quite complex lives, especially nowadays. But what I want to encourage for all of you is, as we explore these teaching, is I want to invite you and encourage you and challenge you to enter into this teaching of Nisargadatta's from his point of view, from his perspective, in order to let this teaching narrow your focus down. Don't ask it to answer every question you have, to solve everything in your life. Let it be exactly what it is, aimed at deeply awakening you to the absolute nature of reality. Because then it has real power. It has tremendous, tremendous power. And then you can receive the gift of it. The gift of this teaching is its one-pointedness, is its narrow pursuit, its hot and narrow pursuit of enlightenment. That's what this teaching is about. And sometimes we really convince ourselves that, we need to answer 101 other questions or get a whole host of other issues in our life straightened out before, we have really any time for reality. And in some relative sense, for some people that may be true, but there's something else. There's something very, very powerful to be realized and to be reckoned with when you endeavor to really join that hot and narrow focus on realizing the absolute nature of reality. And Nisargadatta is one of the best people you ever find to guide that kind of search. So, not only did I really resonate experientially with that old famous quote, when I look within and see that I'm nothing, that's wisdom. When I look out and see that I'm everything, that's love. And between those two, my life turns. I was so stunned by that line because it was exactly what I had experienced. I'm not holding myself up in any way as a comparison with Nisargadatta. I'm simply saying that when he talked about that, it just resonated so deeply with me. I had seen that I am nothing, and I'd seen that I'm everything. And to have somebody just state it so clearly, and so simply, and so unadorned, was amazing to me when I first came upon it. And this is the appeal of his teaching, is that it's unadorned and it resonates. Really, I've always thought that what a spiritual teaching really does is it reminds us of what we deeply know. To awaken is a kind of remembrance. It's not learning something new. It's one of the reasons when sometimes you read a good spiritual teaching that you have the feeling, I know this, I understand this. You may not fully realize it, but you can understand things even before you fully realize them. In other words, they really resonate with you. If you've ever had that feeling, I know this, but I didn't know that I knew it until I read it, until I heard it, until somebody else gave words to it. It was like it was inside of you in a dormant sense, unknown to you, and then as soon as someone gave words to it, what was in you started to flower, and you realized you knew it. And I think this is an experience that so many people had with his teaching. Upon first reading, from what I've heard from a lot of people, they didn't really recognize it. They didn't fully understand it, but it had a way of germinating. It had a power of just staying with you at a deeply unconscious way. And then a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, you read it again, and all of a sudden it's so incredibly meaningful, so incredibly powerful, so incredibly direct. And you wonder, wow, why didn't I see that before? How did I miss that? And that's the power of a good teaching. It lives with you even if you've forgotten it. It dwells with you, even if you're not consciously aware of what's happening. I want to give you another quote of his, which I really love. The I which appears is unreal. Who is it that knows that the I is unreal? The I that appears. The I that has any definition. Good, bad, right, wrong, even down to your gender. Man, woman. The I that appears is unreal. Who is it that knows that the I is unreal?